So I welcome you all. We have special welcome this morning to youth councillors, Jenna Stallard and Christiane. Welcome to you. First meeting, I understand, so you're most welcome. We have some apologies from Councillor Noonan and Councillor Dahlberg, and a lateness apology from Councillor Skinner. I'd like to confirm that the order of business is as per the agenda that has been sent out, and remind any members who have any conflicts of interest to raise those at the appropriate time.
Need to move the apologies.
Would someone like to move that the apologies been accepted, please? Councillor Laurie, seconder. Mayor Rachel, thank you. All those in favour? Against? Carried. We now have a public forum item, traffic calming measures for Kanini Street, and I'd invite the free folk involved to please come up and present your presentation to us. Thank you. If you'd like to introduce yourselves. Just press the button there, right-hand button, and the light will come on.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Carlo. I'm Carlo Wiegand. Brought my wife, Anne-Marie, and our neighbour, Christine.
Catherine.
Catherine. And yes, would like to speak to you about traffic calming measures. Let's give that to you. Right, dear Councillor and Council staff, thanks for giving us the opportunity to present our course here today. We'd like to draw your attention to a situation in our neighbourhood on Kanini Street. Kanini Street is a connecting road, as you might know, linking Vanguard Street over the residential ridge, past Mount Street and Wellington Street down to Rutherford Street. So something personal, shortly after we moved to our new home, and days after our son was born, we lost our pet to a speeding vehicle. Last year we had to bury yet another pet, which met the same demise. That's 2 pets in the space of 2 years. Our neighbour told us that over the years they lost 3 pets to the road and no longer keep pets for that reason. We have a 3-year-old son, and getting to and from our property, be it by foot, bike or car, is a difficult task and makes us nervous. Just recently 2 new babies have been born in straight in our neighbourhood, and the number of parents carrying small children to and from their houses on foot is quite substantial. Kanini Street has a 40 speed limit, yet in the 2013 council speed traffic count, 7 vehicles were in the 70 to 80 km speed bracket. And again, in the latest speed statistics, there's still, the fastest still clocked at 75 km. The situation on Kanini Street is that the lower section from the house numbers about 40 to 80 is relatively straight, narrow, but it has a continuous footpath. This is the first picture I show you just close to where we live. That's where the footpath starts. And further up from there, there is none. Further up, there is no footpath. The street becomes more narrow and cars park randomly on both sides. This changes very much the street characteristics and puts it in a similar category for me to Locking Street, which had a 30 km speed limit installed and is a shared residential zone. Slide 2. So 30k is something we quite like. My personal observation is that motorists driving down from Kanini Street often accelerate around 20 Kanini Street, where Catherine lives, and where the road widens and straightens. As parked vehicles often impair visibility where there is no footpath and there is often people or kids walking directly on the road, the 40k speed limit in this area is too high. Just showing you a couple more pictures from straight where we live. that's looking away the way away from town. Next picture, please. So quite obstructed views, a lot of vehicles randomly parked, at times very narrow and times very wide, which leads to speeding. Next picture. Another one from the same. So our neighborhood is very close to the inner city, and I would easily claim that about a third of the traffic happening from our area is by foot. Next picture, please. Oh, sorry, next one. So a lot of foot traffic, and there's constantly pedestrians going up and down the street. Where there's no footpath, speeding cars are a big hazard for all pedestrians using the route. We have thought of a couple of options of how to fix the problem with speeding cars. And one of them is we could protect the pedestrians by building a footpath. But looking at the existing road and stormwater infrastructure and property boundaries, that could be a hard thing to do. You could organize where people park and have designating parking and non-parking zones. And that could help the overview of the street, but would unlikely counteract speeding vehicles. Next slide. I found this slide somewhere on the internet, but it spoke to me. Roads with possible conflicts between cars and unprotected road users should have a 30k speed limit. That clearly applies to the section of Konini Street we're talking about. You could have visible signage to reduce the speed limit to 30k in the upper part of Konini Street. This could surely help, but still would not prevent incidents such as any potential injury or even death from speeding vehicle. The only thing, last slide please, we think would have an effect would be actually to slow down traffic, and speed bumps would be a very effective measure there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor McGurk?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Really do appreciate you coming in and hearing the issue. A couple of things. I'm just really trying to identify what the issue is. Is it the speed of the vehicles, the lack of the footpath, or inappropriate parking, or a combination of all three?
Actually, inappropriate parking at times actually speeds down traffic, so that's not as such a problem. It is the speed. And really our concerns for lives, be it pets or actually humans.
Then it brings back, in your observations, I'm not sure, I'm wondering if you could help me, in terms of, is it people who are living on the street or further up and around, say, Mountain Street or Konini Street are using that street, or is it people?
You mean pedestrians?
No, vehicles. If it's vehicle speed, where the vehicle's coming from, are your friends and neighbours using it as in the street, or is it others, someone else?
It's hard to say. I would say I observe a lot of service vehicles speeding because they're not from the neighbourhood. There could be residents that are speeding. It's unclear as such.
Okay, no, that's fine. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Laurie?
Thanks, Chairman, and thanks, guys. I've often... It's actually a street you can... I know it sounds like an irresponsible thing to say, but it's actually a street you can go down pretty fast for some reason. I think it's because it's so straight, and it's got an angle on it, and I know that on a bicycle, you can go down there really fast, and probably people are going down there too fast. So I had a similar question to Councillor McGurk. It doesn't strike me as what we call a rat run street. It's not a street you use necessarily to get to somewhere else, and like a shortcut. And I wonder if it's sort of Mount Street residents and other people shooting up and down there, but maybe it's like you said, the tradespeople. Do you think it's getting worse?
I would say it's pretty steady.
Right.
It's been... Yeah, it's not getting worse as such. It's definitely not a rat road. Mount Street has judder bars or speed bumps.
Yeah.
higher up, so it's very low speed there naturally. It's also very narrow, and there's no other throughway.
Right. What is there anything up there in terms of signage, in terms of encouraging people to slow down?
To my knowledge, on Kanini Street, it only has 40k signs, nothing else.
Right.
They're lower down. Kanini,
Yeah.
if you start coming up.
Okay. It'd be interesting to see what, through you, Mr. Chairman, it'd be interesting to see what kind of influence one of those signs that tells you how fast you're going, those electronic signs would have, because I suspect people don't realise how fast they're going down Kanini Street until they're going too fast.
We had those signs melted very close to our home, and they were up maybe 2-3 months.
Yep.
Very sad that they're gone. A couple of weeks ago they're gone. Yeah, it might have had an influence at the time when it was up.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions? All right, thank you so much. Oh, Madam Mayor?
Just the questions for the officers when you, in relation to the public forum, Mr. Chair, I can take those after you conclude or now.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
The Mayor wants to ask questions once
Okay.
finished off.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. We will take on board your concerns and we'll come back to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, just a question for the officers. There was reference from our presenters at Public Forum around the latest speed data from council showing indications, or some data coming out and showing speeds of over 70 k's an hour coming down here. I'm just wondering where this particular street sits in our safety assessments and potential changes. So if we're seeing speeds of that nature, are they enough to trigger a response from council? I mean, 70 k's in a 40k zone, so it's rather, it is excessive and dangerous.
So through the Chair, I'll take that question on board. I'm unable to answer that question right now, but I'll take the presentation and everything that I've heard. I'll sit with officers and the additional questions, and I will make sure that we get a reply back to the people that have presented.
Well, Mr. Chair, probably I guess what I'd like to do is to actually, in terms of the committee, there's been some requests for some form of mitigation in relation to dealing and education in relation to dealing with this issue. But there's also an issue around regulation. So if we have speeding vehicles, and we know we have speeding vehicles in here, I'm interested in whether we've contacted the police about this being a hotspot, how we'd see it. Speeding vehicles actually should be, there should be a price, a cost for speeding, particularly in residential streets. So how can we get this back to the committee? I don't necessarily need to have a full report on it, but I wonder if there's some way of moving this to just a status report update so we can see where this sits in the program, because we will have a range of streets, particularly if we've had the movable speed signs in there, and I know they only stay there for a period of time because if they're there for too long, people then just get used to them and they don't have the education purpose they need. So I just would like particularly, I have to say, sorry Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to go on this, but this is something that really, really bothers me as a mayor. I am absolutely over people speeding in residential streets. Residential streets are for people and neighbourhoods, and cars need to slow down. So whatever we can do, I would like us to be moving forward on that. Whether it's an education campaign, whether it's a flash mob of councillors on Kanini Street saying this is enough, slow down. I don't know what it is, but we just can't tolerate this sort of stuff.
Thank you. I'm getting some signals from the staff. Which,
No, I will answer. So through the Chair, yes, we do take issues of speeding very, very seriously, and we do believe that there should be a zero tolerance of speed on our roads. We do work very, very closely with the police, and I will check with staff after this meeting, making a point of actually talking to the police. In terms of getting something back on the status report, it's usually a recommendation that's required to get it on the status report, but I can give you my assurances that where items do come to the public forum, that we do a full investigation and we do get back to the people that have made the application, and I can always give the committee an update via a separate email.
Perhaps just for efficiency's sake, if I could move that we receive a verbal update via the status report at the next meeting in relation to the matters raised in public forum today.
Thank you. Do we have a second of that, Councillor Laurie?
Yeah, I'll second that. But also, question, is there anything regarding Kanini Street in the long-term plan?
Through the chair, in relation to
Well, just in relation to any works that
in
we're going
terms
to
of
be doing,
footpath,
Kanini Street?
in terms of footpath,
Yeah.
no, to the best of my knowledge, no. In terms of speed bumps, no. We have a traffic pump policy. So, to the best of my knowledge, no.
I was wondering, I echo the Mayor's concerns and her thoughts, and I would actually love to see what impact a speed camera up there would have, just in the short term.
And through the chair, we will investigate that as well.
Right, thanks.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded, but we've got one further question from Councillor Barker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chairman. I too echo the Mayor's comments, but I also take note of the presenter made the point that parked cars, in the reality that they're there, are a mitigating factor in speed. And hence I would like when the research comes back, can you include any data on actual accidents? I know we heard about some pets. I'm sure we would have heard if any human had been there, but has it got a record in this street of accidents, vehicle to vehicle?
And through the chair, when I give my verbal reply to the next committee, I'll make sure that it's comprehensive enough, yes.
So we have the motion being moved and seconded. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So we now go to item 5, confirmation of the minutes, pages 7 to 13 of the agenda. Are there any corrections from anybody relating to that being a true and correct record? Would someone then like to move that is a true and correct record? Councillor Matheson, second by Councillor Laurie. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we go to item number 6, pages 14 to 17, the status report from Works and Infrastructure. So page 14. We'll just take them page by page. So we've got page 15. A question from Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Page 14. Can we have an indication of when the surface of Waimea Road is going to be reinstated to a smooth passageway? When's that due to happen?
Sorry, through the chair, you're talking about the resealing something.
Yes.
Just didn't hear the resealing.
Yes.
So through the chair, we are planning to undertake the resealing of that road, I think around about the 15th of April, so it's after Easter, during the school holidays. We're busy liaising with the residents, officers, as well as the chair, Councillor Walker. We're making an effort to go speak to certain individuals so we can make sure that the planning is correct. We're working with comms to make sure that we get the message out, but around about the 15th of April, all things being equal.
Thank you, Mr Levin. Can it be also time to have the least disruption to the businesses in the area?
Through the chair, that's exactly the reason we are going to go make individual visits, but we are doing it during school holidays. We're doing it after Easter, and yes, and we need to get it done before the rain and the cold sets in.
Thank you.
Yeah, that visit is actually going to occur at 4 o'clock this afternoon with the locals. So we're very mindful of that. Thank you. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. On Waimea Road as well, opportunity for pedestrian severance across Waimea Road, options under investigation. Initial consultation with affected residents has commenced. Officers will also be reviewing the program business case recently released by NZTA. From memory, that was in September last year that came out. I would have thought by now we knew where we were at. Can you give us some thoughts on that?
So through the chair, as I indicated, yeah, this is a work in progress. We've started the initial consultation, and as we've expected, that's got some support. It's got some that are neutral, and obviously it's got some that don't want anything out there, outside of their properties. So we started that process, as we indicated, and we're just busy working through it. This isn't something that's just going to happen quickly. It's going to be a process.
So, with respect, it started in 2016, and people have been asking for a bit more safety for pedestrians in that area for a long time. And I hear what you're saying, but you didn't really answer my question about the program business case, which came out in September. So we've seen that. Does that tell us that we should do this, or does it tell us that we shouldn't do it?
We're working through that through the chair. I'm unable to give the details of that, but we're trying to take everything into consideration and not work in isolation.
Councillor Ackland.
I just want to ask a similar question through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Laurie's questions. It's just, Alec, I'm just a bit confused. Just that the officers will be reviewing the program business case to ascertain any effects on the work. We don't know what the effects of the program business case are on the work that's proposed. Is that what you're saying?
So through the chair, what I'm saying is that the issue of pedestrian crossings on Waimea Road came through the Works and Infrastructure Committee.
Yeah.
We're busy consulting on that, and as I said, we've done that initial consultation, but there are other factors that we need to consider, and part of that is looking at what is in the program business case, and we're just saying we actually can't do that in isolation.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you right now in terms of what the program business case does not have any details, but we have started the front end of that by doing that consultation. That'll hopefully give us some data and put us in a better situation to actually see how what comes out of the program business case. So this could still be some way off.
Just a subsequent question, if I may, Mr. Chair. So, thanks. I think I understand what you're saying. Is essentially we're in a bit of a position where we don't quite know what is coming out of this. But don't we run a risk then that we've gone too far in consultation then if we don't actually know what we're going to end up with? So for instance, the program business case talks about clearways, right? Have we gone out and consulted on that? Is that what you're saying?
Through the chair. So we haven't done any consultation in terms of what's in the program business case because that's not our project. What we have specifically gone out to do initial consultation with is where we think pedestrian crossing should be, and the initial consultation with those residents. Once we've got that data and we've done, it's really just been an initial one view, one tranche of views. We will then sit down, go through that and see how that relates to other things. To other things on the table. All I've alerted the committee here is that there are other things on the table, not just speaking to the residents,
and that
we need to take into consideration.
Just if I may, just my final question, just so I can tie that off. But so what's in there, like for instance, clearways, for instance, in that program business case is a suggestion for widening roads and so on. That won't affect the stuff that we've gone out for consultation on. That won't affect the pedestrian crossings.
I haven't, through the chair, as I've indicated, I haven't raised anything that's in the program business case because it's not for us to do. All we've done is gone out to the residents and socialised where pedestrian crossing could or should or couldn't be as a result of desire lines and where people think they should cross.
Okay.
We need to take that information and look at the complete picture. And it may well be that this doesn't happen for a wee while until such time that we work through all the scenarios.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I just want to follow on from the questions from Councillor Laurie and Councillor Ackland because I similarly circled March 2016 and then looked at this issue here. This, if I recall, we produced our report around Waimea Road and the need to create improvements, and it comes around, I think it comes off the back of livable arterials. I think that was where it started, that we actually had gone and spoken to our community and actually consulted on Waimea Road being a livable arterial, one that actually you could get across and the severance issues were addressed. So I am a little concerned, and I just want clarification from Mr. Laverdis that we have a resolution from council here which was to improve the livability of Waimea Road. That's actually what this is about. We have also have a resolution from council that still is on the books and it can be retested, but I suspect it will have the same outcome, is that council did not have an appetite for three-laning Waimea Road. And if you think about livable arterials, then that's absolutely counter to a livable arterial. So I'm a little bit concerned with that second part of this, which says that officers will also be reviewing the program business case for the Nelson Southern Link investigation, I presume that means, in relation to this project, because my expectation is that the resolutions of council are being carried out, which is creating a livable arterial, which is having the crossing points put on it so kids can get across here to go to school and home at the end of the day. So I'm just, given it's 2016, it's over 2 years ago that and after considerable waiting, we said we want to get on with Waimea Road being a livable arterial. What's causing the hold up now? And I understand the difficulty of pedestrian crossings and taking out car parking and the rest of it, but that does seem to be quite a wait, and what I'm now reading is that there's now going to be another wait based on a project which is actually, if it's talking about 3-laning, is actually counter to the resolutions of council.
So through the chair, I think this has been on the books for a wee while, but we have signalled through all previous status reports that we were going to undertake consultation before the end of the last calendar year, so by December 2017. So that has been reported to this Works and Infrastructure Committee on numerous dates, and we indicated that would either be undertaken through the minor safety works for this financial year or next financial year. So we have undertaken that preliminary consultation, and it may well be that we put in pedestrian crossings. But I think as officers we need to be prudent, that we need to consider everything holistically, and it may well be that we do come back to this committee and say, yes, we are going to put in 1 or 2 and they're going to be in these locations, and the consequence of that is that if we build them now, that there could be something that happens as a result of the program business case. But we're certainly not going to wait for the outcome of the program business case, and I understand that there's an item on the books in terms of clearways, and we're not holding off, but we are just looking at a holistic view. We've done that initial consultation, and we will be bringing that back with a firm recommendation in terms of the number and where they are, because we understand that is an issue in terms of safety across Waimea.
Consequent question, when will that be reported back to this committee?
So through the chair, it is a current item on the status report, and we will, as we have and will continue to do, report that via the status reports back to this committee.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, that didn't answer my question. Mr. Levutis indicated that consultation had been undertaken, that you'll be reporting back with a firm recommendation. That sounds to me like a report. When will we be seeing the report coming to this committee?
So through the chair, I cannot answer that question.
All right. Well, it seems that there's certainly a strong opinion that we should keep this moving. And so, we have a further question from Councillor Lloyd.
I guess so, yeah. I guess I'm sort of trying to cut to the chase, and it has actually been very helpful hearing Mr. Levutis talk about the things that are going on, and also actually to be reminded of some things that are going on by the Mayor. Am I right in thinking that we're not doing this because we're not sure whether or not Waimea Road might be 3-laned? And if Waimea Road is going to be 3-laned, then it would be problematic to have done that work prior to that happening. And if that is what's happening, then I support that. I support council waiting to see what's going to happen. Is that where we're at?
So, through the chair, I think, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. I have to take a holistic approach in terms of the work that we undertake. I understand that the issue of safety and crossing of Waimea Road has been an issue for some time. We have indicated to this committee the program and the timeline that we would undertake to get that done, that I promised that I would get the preliminary consultation done by December. To be fair, I don't think I quite achieved that. I think we did it in January this financial year. All I'm saying is that it is likely that we will, as per the original recommendation, and to make sure that there is safety across Waimea Road, look at where and when those can be constructed. I'm just alerting everybody that I'm taking a holistic view. And even after we look at that program business case, it may be that we don't consider that at all, and we do go ahead with the original council resolution. But I need to take a holistic view on everything that we do. That's all I'm saying.
Thanks.
Madam Mayor.
With all due respect to Mr. Levutis, it's the committee's job to take a holistic view. And I believe the committee did take a holistic view when it resolved and asked officers to go away and sort out making Waimea Road a livable arterial and improving access across that. Now, I understand that there is another project and that NZTA have a range of options they'd like to look at, and they consider using our local network to address the inadequacy of the estate highway network. But this council actually has a network that it wants to be livable. And I think the direction has been quite clear that we want improvements on Waimea Road. Our community is saying, please improve the safety on Waimea Road, make it easier to cross. And they've been waiting now for probably about 5 years for this piece of work to happen. If the issue here is that NZTA are now withholding funds for these projects and their funding, then that's something that needs to be brought to my attention with urgency, and certainly to this committee's. If that's not the case, then I expect the work just to be coming to us, and I would say at the next Works and Infrastructure Committee, Mr Levertis, I'd really be looking to see this coming to a conclusion.
Yep. Right. I'll undertake to have discussions with Mr Levertis, excuse me, to progress that. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Mr Chair. I think it is useful because it would, like, I can understand the point, and because of delay, you know, things don't get addressed in the community, needs safe refuge and so on, and what we've talked about. What cost would it be? So say, I mean, is that one of the factors that, through you, Mr Chair, Mr Levertis is having to consider as a cost effect of, for instance, putting down infrastructure and then having a change of direction within a short amount of time afterwards, we actually then have to rip up that infrastructure. Is that one of the issues that's going part of the holistic consideration?
So it's interesting listening to this line of questioning from each side of the table, which, with due respect, probably has very little to do with pedestrian crossings on Waimea Road, and probably isn't fair to keep on asking Alec questions and trying to score points off him, which is what's going on here. Well, it is, isn't it? Yes, clearly there's a resolution to make Waimea Road a livable arterial. Since then, obviously the program business case has come out and identified that Waimea Road might be a solution. So if we as staff put up a report that didn't acknowledge that, then we would be quite rightly kicked for that. So we do have to take a big picture view, and that recommendation or that preliminary finding from the program business case is something that we have to consider. So, and I think we'd also have to be mindful that if we put in pedestrian crossings across Waimea Road, that would almost be directly against what the Transport Agency has indicated might be their plan B. So at the end of the day, the council gets to decide, but we do have to consider those implications, and it may be the location of those. I mean, at the moment, we don't even know where those clearways may be, and there's been no detailed design done on that. But well, I think the cost of putting in the pedestrian crossing and then taking it out is probably some coat of paint and some sandblasting. There is the reputational issue from our point of view. Putting something in and then taking it out never looks good. And also, if people have then got in the habit of using a pedestrian crossing and then it's taken away, then that's when you get a lot of people in the gallery. So yes, we will bring a report back as quickly as possible. We'll certainly try for the next Works and Infrastructure. I don't know what the team's workload is, but I hear the urgency, but I suspect we will have a similar debate or line of questioning as we are, as staff are enjoying this morning.
Thank you.
No, I think we've discussed that one enough. We'll now move on to page 16.
Mr Chair, I'll move that we receive the report, and I'd like to speak to it when we do.
Do we have a seconder? Yeah, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Yeah, no, we'll continue going through. So we've got page 16. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Can I don't want to get involved in this long debate on page 15, but I want to just remind folk that Waimea Road is our road. And no, Please don't. It is our road, and it is our responsibility in whatever form to ensure that it becomes a livable street or livable road. We have got a report floating around, yet to be completed, on some suggestions that NZTA may want to use Waimea Road to solve a problem with the state highway. Well, I think the priority lies with us, and I just don't want people to forget that.
Thank you. Right, page 16. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think a few of us went to that presentation at Cush, and I think some of the comment there probably is not quite reflective of some of the feedback I heard there. I'm just wondering when we are likely to get a report back on that meeting.
So through the chair, perhaps Councillor McGurk could tell me what is inaccurate in the status report.
And just in terms of
talk to it?
Yeah, certainly the resistance to the value, the cost of the project, and they're actually sort of open to a more compromise in terms of the scope of work.
So through the chair, my status report has been written such that when I wrote the status report, I only had indicative feedback.
Yeah.
My status report also indicates that at the next committee we will have a full report on this matter, which will be in May. We will give the full feedback from the visit, as well as the possible recommendations in terms of how to go forward. But I don't think this is an inaccurate reflection of what happened at all.
No, I'm not suggesting.
The record straight.
Just not suggesting that for a moment, because it'd be fair to say that the group that wasn't a wide selection of the group, and they had an opportunity, wanted to go back and feedback. So don't take it like this is inaccurate. I'm just wondering that there is actually more information. I'm just wondering.
So through the chair, as I indicated, we have that information. Staff are busy undertaking that report, and it'll be a comprehensive report when it comes next to the next Works and Infrastructure Committee meeting.
Councillor Ackland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question through you we don't have anything. We've only got the budgeted amount in the long-term plan, because I just note, like my thinking when I read the opening pages of the long-term plan, the second sort of priority there was CBD enhancement. And do we need to consider, or would it, I suppose it's not really you for answer, but a consideration would, or the timing of it when the report comes back. If the budget is, for instance, bigger and our priority is CBD enhancement, do we need to carefully think about that as a priority? But actually all my question is the timing on the report. Will that be coming back in time for the long-term plan, actually?
So through the chair, we promise that we will have a report come back to the May Works and Infrastructure Committee. Hopefully that will be comprehensive enough to deal with CBD enhancements and the priorities. The budget for that project is in this current financial year. I have indicated that I think we have lost the window of constructing something now, which by implication means that it'll happen next financial year, but the report will be comprehensive in terms of options, in terms of what the businesses gave feedback as per the workshop, and with a recommendation, cover finances, cover budget, cover timing.
Thank you. Page 17. And that concludes it. So it's been moved by the Mayor. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I would, and I'd just like to respond to the comments from the Chief Executive. Point scoring, I think, is one way to look at that debate. The other one is to actually highlight that, as it's the Deputy Mayor said, is that I'm not sitting here as a puppet of NZTA, and it is important to understand that local roads belong to this community. This community has set very clear expectations, whether it's across the east-west cycling links, no matter what it is. And we have been waiting now for 5 years to improve the livability of that arterial. What I'm really clear on, and I have been, which is why, having sat at this table for consistently, actually, along with Councillor Barker, being the only people that have worked through this, Deputy Mayor had a break for 3 years. We went through some very tough and actually perhaps not as well informed data on the arterial study as what we now have, is that the option and the reason why this council was opposed to three-laning some of our local roads was exactly for this reason, that actually our community has a desire for livable streets. We've just heard a public forum where we've had people coming in to say, actually, we want our streets to be slower. We want our streets to be for people. We want our streets to be safe. We want our streets to connect us across our city. And I actually think that is a very desirable outcome and one we can achieve. But what this discussion this morning highlights is that if you start contemplating the option of three-laning your local network, then you can say goodbye to livable streets. That's essentially what that's saying. And I think that what we've got to determine here is that we've heard from our community. They've been very consistent about those cycle links across the east-west. That's one of the reasons we're looking at this crossing, to try and get more kids walking and cycling to school. And I am committed to achieving that outcome. I understand that there is a piece of work that the officers want to look at, but I would remind everyone sitting at this table that we work for the people of Nelson. We are not here and not employed to work for the New Zealand Transport Agency. We work alongside them and we cooperate with them, but I can't offer up the assets of the city and the desirability of a livable city and compromise that because of the inadequacies of a state highway network. I'm not going to do that as Mayor. I'll work with the agency, but not at the cost of the people of Nelson. The costs of an inadequate state highway need to be borne by the Transport Agency. And I am quite confident that there are a range of opportunities for us, and we've talked about that around technology and innovation in public transport that actually can be implemented that will allow a livable Waimea road with the crossings that people have been desiring for so long, to get more kids walking and cycling to school, more people walking and cycling to work, and I want us to get on with it.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie.
Thanks, Chairman. It is an interesting discussion, and I think it is an important one. I think there's a big difference between Waimea Road and Kanini Street, and sort of conflating the two is not that helpful. Kanini Street is a residential street. Waimea Road is an arterial route. Regardless of what happens in the future, it will remain an arterial route. And I would like to see some progress in this area. But while there are many people who are concerned about safety on Waimea Road, even more people are concerned about congestion. And more people in Nelson want us to do something about congestion sooner rather than later. And if NZTA has some ideas about how we can reduce congestion by making some sensible changes, perhaps some long overdue changes to Waimea Road, then it makes sense for us to hear them out, and it makes sense for us to hold on any projects that we might do that we might then have to take out, because we want to reduce congestion on our network.
Right, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Yep. Oh, Councillor Acton. Sorry.
I just wanted to add my 2 cents, which is simply that I'm heartened as a governor of the city that we're taking an overall holistic approach to decision making. I mean, one of the main things is to make an evidence-based approach, and so going ahead with one sort of one position at the expense of perhaps the cost of the financial, the perception issues that the Chief Executive talked about, and even potentially incorrectly socialising people into a conduct which we then try and change, so sending mixed messages, that the expense of that must give cause for pause. And so taking a holistic approach, in my view, is completely good governance, and I'm really heartened to hear it. And I think that we need to take a evidence-based approach rather than a emotive one on issues such as this. So I appreciate the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. Right, so it's been moved and seconded. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. There is no chairperson's report now, as I was going to mention the resurfacing of Waimea Road. That has now been discussed. So we now go to item 8, pages 18 to 35 of your agenda.
So through the chair, if we could invite Mr. Jeff Robinson to the chair. He's the the General Manager of the NRSBU and the Nelson Tasman Regional Landfill Business Unit. I have written the reports, but the content comes from the General Manager, and he's here to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Welcome, Mr. Robinson. Thank you. Are there any alterations or additions to your report?
No, they aren't.
Thank you.
Sorry, if we're talking about the landfill business unit, then there's no alteration.
Yep. Thank you. Yep. Right. I'll take everyone has read the report in detail. Do we have any questions of Mr. Robinson? Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Reading the report, I was looking for details of the landfill gas collection, and I look at the financials, and I'm wondering, is the income arising from the sale of the landfill gases included in the other recoveries line? And I'm wondering why it's reducing from 83,000 to 59,000 for the next few years. Is that reflective of an indication that there'll be less landfill gas collected and sold and help subsidise the cost of the operation, or is it something else that has dropped?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Barker, which specific page are you
I'm looking at page 31, and it's the financial plan, budget summary 2018 to 2021. Under income, third line, other recoveries, 83,000 for the 2017-18 year, reducing to 59,000 for the next 3 years. What's the detail? Is it indicative of a reduction in landfill gas sales or landfill gas production or something else?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe that there's any change in the recovery from the landfill gas. There's a calculation where at some point council, the business unit actually receives an amount of money, and it's a formula that depends on the level of the emissions trading. So I don't have my supporting team here, Andrew Bishop, the financial controller, that assists me with some of these financial questions. I'm happy to come back and give more detail on that, but I'm certain that there's no change in the agreement with the private gas company.
No, through the chair, we would have had Andrew Bishop up here, but I understand that he's on leave or he's sick or one of the two. So unfortunately, that I think what we will do is we'll take note of that question, and then make sure that we have the answer to that for the council meeting, and then I will wrap all of those answers up and I'll formally write back to Mr. Jeff Robinson as the GM with council's comments.
Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. It's a good question, a very good question from Councillor Barker with regard to that matter, because there are a client attachment to this answer. If we are supplying some of this gas to run some places around here, and I think we need to know that this is not a reduction. I can't see how it can be a reduction. The landfill is not shrinking. So I think an answer to that would be most valuable as soon as you're able. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can assure you that there's no reduction in the plant around the gas. The other recoveries, I'm pretty sure in this instance, would be other items of recovery that are not associated with the gas collection.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, through you, Mr Chair. Mr Robinson, I just wanted to take you to page 23 of our report. There's reference there's a covering letter that's come in to the Chief Executive's in a bullet point, the last one there, which discusses the desire to retain $300,000. I just want, in terms of surpluses, and do we have a report that led to that recommendation? So was there a report that came to the regional landfill business unit establishing why that was needed?
Through you, Mr Chair, and to Madam Mayor. There was a report in the agenda which explained that. One of the key reasons to have a surplus is that you think about most council operating accounts, whether it's water or wastewater, they carry an operating surplus, and that enables the council, in this case the business unit, to be able to forecast with some certainty the landfill charges. Without having, in other words, at the moment we've set the landfill charges at $141 a tonne. If we were to end up with a zero balance every year, it's likely that it might end up being some odd figure like 100, it might go up and down. So the main reason for the surplus was to be able to forecast with certainty to the market and to the two owners a certainty in setting our fees. So it's a balancing fund mainly for that.
So just for clarification, so essentially you're using it as a smoothing tool, or are you using it as a subsidy?
It's more of a smoothing tool.
And so over time, what's going to happen to those accumulated surpluses?
Through the Chair, the maximum that we have suggested is $300,000, and that would be if there was a surplus during any year. At the moment, the deed of agreement states that any surplus or deficit will be passed on to the two councils in equal shares. So if there was a deficit, then the two councils would need to pay in to get a zero balance, and if there was a surplus, at the moment all the surplus will be given back, and this is over and above the council disposal levy, which is also in the business plan. And so it's just essentially, this is the first year that this business unit is operated, and it's normal practice for a kind of to have a semi-closed account to be able to carry some surplus in your operating account.
So to you, Mr. Chair, just for clarification, so the 300,000, just so to make sure it's enough, is there some sort of forecasting that was done to establish that based on historic fluctuation, to say, look, that should be about sufficient to achieve that outcome?
Through the Chair, Madam Mayor, I think it's fair to say that we've been operating for, I think, 7 months now, and we don't really have a base to go back to. We started operating in July last year. So this is our best forward estimate of what we could think about. And when we thought about it, we sort of thought about what would $1 a tonne affect the actual operation charges. Yeah.
Thank you. A couple of follow-up questions, but I can wait if anyone else has got questions. Right, I'll continue. Then if we go, Mr. Robinson, just to page 28 of our agenda. And this, I understand, is the first business plan for the regional landfill. And and I can see, looking at the rest of our agenda, that it draws on the NRSBU business plan to some extent in terms of the KPIs. So if I look at the KPI on page 28, second one from the bottom, which talks about key performance measure. The objective is to minimise adverse environmental, social, cultural impacts, and then you have the KPI measure, environmental, social, cultural impacts are considered in all decision making. How are you currently doing that, particularly the cultural aspect?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think in the first instance there is we're bound by a number of resource consents, and the resource consents in place for York Valley and for Eves Valley have both been in place for many years, and I know that there were environmental, economical and cultural assessments done in granting those consents, and therefore I think you can make a link that we have an obligation to comply with the resource consents, not only through the conditions but also in the intent. There is a requirement in the deed of agreement to have an iwi advisor on the committee, and I wrote to both the chief executives late last year and sought advice on the appointment of the iwi advisor. And at that stage, the response came back that we weren't the only committee that was actually seeking an iwi advisor, and that the chief executives would work together to be able to come up with an appointment. The actual deed says that the iwi advisor needs to be appointed in agreement with all of the 8 or 9 iwi. So I think from a cultural point of view, there is potentially a gap at the moment, which we intend to fill as soon as we can. But as far as everything else goes, I believe that through the resource consents, we are taking them into account.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Hopefully that matter will be addressed. So you just to clarify, so you wrote to the chief executives of both councils last year, to Mr. Hammond or Mr. Doherty or or Mrs. Headley?
Through you, Mr. Chair, at that stage it was Mr. Hammond.
Mr. Hammond.
And Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you. It's good to know, something for us to follow up. Just final questions, just relate to the financial plan on page 31. And so Councillor Barker's asked you around and maybe that you're not in a position to answer these questions. I just noticed there are some, as we look through this, we're seeing some reasonably substantial changes. Just looking at perhaps the local disposal levy. Are you able to talk the committee through the changes in terms of the 17-18 to 18-19 variations as we run down those? Landfill income, operations maintenance, emissions trading, local disposal levy, as to what's creating those changes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Madam Mayor, it's interesting if you look at the percentage breakup of what it costs to operate the landfills. Almost 85% of that figure comes from the emissions trading and from the waste levy and from the council disposal levy. And in other words, the balance of 15% is time for staff, consultants and contractors to operate it. As far as the council disposal levy goes, there was a request that came from both councils to increase the levy up to 2.2 million for each council, and that was an increase on the previous year, which was around about 1.95 million. At our meeting in December, Nikki Harrison came along and so did Richard Kirby to represent the two councils' wish to increase the levy. And there was some background given as to the reasons around the increase to 2.2 million. And that was discussed and agreed. So going forward, we've kept that the local disposal levy, which it's like it's a distribution to the councils, 50-50. They've been kept at the same. There's always uncertainty with the other significant items, which is the emissions trading scheme, the ETS, and the waste levy, because they are really dictated by the market and by government. And we don't know whether there may be any changes with the new government yet.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so just the change in terms of the ETS scheme, I mean, we're looking at 1036 and it's jumping to 1947. What is the factor there? Is that because the unit price is increasing, or which it is? I'm aware of that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. So I know that there's been quite a bit of work done with Andrew Bishop and Nikki Harrison, looking at the market values, and and predicting an increase.
Okay. Do you see any, just through this, do you see any risk to us just in terms of that ETS, the ETS scheme and the unit price? If the unit prices go up significantly, is there a risk, is there a financial risk here sitting for this business unit?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, there is. Certainly it's a risk, yes.
So just in terms of that, Mr. Chair, I'm conscious Ms. Harrison's here. I'm looking at, that's a significant change. I'm looking at that as a significant change, and certainly the unit price is increasing, and there are factors that would cause the New Zealand, I mean, we will recall that in terms of the unit price, it absolutely plunged to extremely low number and didn't actually do the job that it needed to do in terms of carbon reduction in CO2 emissions. It's now certainly on an escalation pathway, and I would suggest that with the new government we could expect that to continue. And I'm just wondering whether that forecasting is what we're seeing here, whether this is pre or post the change of government and a very strong message around CO2 emissions, whether we need to be contemplating that in our business model. And whether Ms. Harrison is in a position to respond to that, or Mr. Robinson.
Through the Chair, just while Nikki comes up, what I can say is that Andrew and Nikki are looking at this, and in fact I've seen correspondence where they're talking to our banking advisors, and what we do is we pre-purchase ahead. We look at the best rates, and when we came in we took the current credits that both councils had, put them together, and they became part of the new business unit. And I think just recently we've sort of bought in the order of $20,000 or $40,000 credits. So I think we're actually, we're not just waiting for something to happen, we're actually trying to look at the market and purchase. But Nikki knows more about this than me.
So through the Chair, so basically in the current year we've had the benefit of some previous hedging that we've undertaken with it for current credits, as well as I think it's the last year of the phase out. They had a phase out where you didn't actually have to deliver the full one-to-one ETS credit. I think the business plan's been done on a relatively conservative basis, but we have been undertaking hedging when we can, conscious up to our maximums, because we're within our treasury policy, because we're conscious that the price, and it has been increasing, so we've taken on as much as we can.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so Ms. Harrison, just in terms of the ETS scheme, you're comfortable at the moment in terms of what we're looking at in the budget projections and where things are landing, that there's scope within there to deal with the trends that we're seeing and the messages from government around the importance of ETS and actually getting it back to operating how it was intended to operate when it was first introduced. We've got that enough scope within here to manage that?
Through the Chair, that's my understanding, that the budget's been built on a conservative basis, and effectively where that goes is it pushes up landfill fees. It's a direct, that is a direct cost to disposing of waste, is that it will push up landfill fees. Thank you, as that occurs.
Any further questions? Would someone then like to move that that this committee receives the report and as per the agenda, and that we make the recommendation to the council based on that? Do we have a mover and a seconder for that? Someone like to move? Councillor Laurie, seconder. Thank you, Councillor Ackland. All those in favour? Oh, sorry.
Well, not being a member of the committee, but with your
indulgence
agreement, I'd like to make some comments.
Please do.
Before the motion is put. And in particular, I'm looking at page 31, the financial report. I don't think it really shows to the reader the reality of what's actually happening here. We've got two significant taxes included in this, and those taxes are designed, as I understand it, to change behaviour. They're not going to do that because people don't realise when they buy their bags and they pay for their special wheelie bins, that they're actually paying for these things. At the end of the day, it's the consumer, it's our residents who are paying all of these fees. Granted, a contractor goes to the landfill and pays the fee to get in, but he's making a profit out of what is paid for by the residents. And that doubling by $1 million of the emissions trading scheme over the next 3 years, that's just going to be paid by the people because they have to get rid of their rubbish. And they'll have no idea that they're paying that extra money, and hence they won't be likely to change their behaviour in any way. But the one that annoys me the most, and I do say annoys, is the local disposable levy. We take that and we collect that in the same way that people paying for their rubbish disposal and collection, and that's all used to subsidise and pay for recycling in our city, as I understand it. And I can be corrected, but I believe that the majority, if not all, is put to the cost of having recycling. And I'm hearing more and more that the recycling is not recovering from sales of recyclable material as much as it used to. So I have a concern that what's in front of us doesn't really explain the situation. The reality is that this can only happen if our residents keep paying the money. And they're paying it, but they're not getting the message, so they don't... What's the likelihood that they're going to change behaviour when they don't really know? So I think I would like to see us be more transparent in the way we actually describe what's happening and the way we record it in our financials. So just a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Mr. Robinson, you've got a response? Oh, no, okay. All right, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm happy to receive the report, but I would say with a plan, I would say I feel it is somewhat light on assessing risk, and when I'm looking at business plans, I do like to see a section that is discussing risk. I really don't see that highlighted here, and I think the reason I had done a series of questions around the ETS and other matters is we're looking at perhaps a period of disruptive change around waste minimisation and CO2 emissions, and I see that as a positive thing. It will potentially, it will have impact on this business unit, and I just feel that this version of the plan is somewhat light on risk. I understand it's the first one, and I certainly would, as it moves through into its next iteration, hopefully I should check that if it's for annual review or reporting, will obviously be reported on an annual basis, then I would be looking to see the risk, a greater emphasis on risk moving forward. I understand that it is a new business unit, and Mr. Robinson's right in saying, look, we're putting it together. Very difficult to create the forecast scenario at this point, but as well as getting some data back and understanding that, the next iteration I would like to see a greater emphasis on risk.
Thank you. No further discussion? And I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. We now go to item 9, Regional Sewerage Business Unit Draft Business Plan, pages 36 to 59. Again, we take it that the reports have all been read. Are there any queries of Mr. Robinson? I should also check, Mr. Robinson, any alterations or additions to your report?
Through Mr. Chair, yes, there's actually an error on page 8 in the 3-year renewal expenditure forecast. So that may not be your page 8. It's page 8 in the. I'll have to find it's page 8 in the report. Is it 47? Thank you. The years 2019, 20, 2020, 21, they don't total up to those totals at the bottom. However, the correct totals have been pulled through into the table on page 49, which is the 10-year financial plan. So apology for that. And our intention is to correct, as we take whatever changes are required to the business plan, we will make a correction to that table and get it correct.
Thank you. So, with that in mind, any further queries? Madam Mayor?
Thank you, Mr Chair, through you. Mr Robinson, just sort of starting at the front end of the, and we're dealing with the business plan, I take it now. I would have actually probably preferred, Mr Chair, to have done the annual report before we did, to look at what happened before we dealt with what we're going to do, but never mind, I can work my way through this, I think. Just in terms of the business plan moving forward, Mr Robinson, in terms of, there's no mention in here in terms of retention of clients, and I'm conscious that there are some risk around that. How have you assessed that in terms of your commercial clients?
Through you, Mr Chair. The business unit has 5 agreements, and that's which need to be signed. It's a trade-based agreement, and in that agreement it has all of the requirements of how you can contribute and what you may contribute and what you can't contribute, and how you end up paying for the service. The 2 are the councils and the other 3 are the industrial users. So the one way of getting security is to have the deed of agreement signed by all of the parties, and at the moment there is a current set of deeds which are going out for renewed signage. The other way is that I chair a meeting every quarter. It's typically done a week before the board meets, and it's a specific customers meeting. And we had one 2 or 3 weeks ago, and at that meeting we go around. This has been going on for many years. We go around and we ask each of the 3 industrial contributors to confirm what the current business case is, their continuity, and there is, and so certainly there have been quite a few discussions with those 3 contributors around that. So that's the kind of combination of how we deal with that.
Question in relation to that, Mr Robinson, there's been a reported comment around NZA and the continuity of NZA. So have you contemplated that they make the discontinuance of NZA as a client?
Through you, Mr Chair, we have had representatives from NZA Foods at both of our, certainly the 2 that I've chaired, at both of our meetings. And they have been very open about the sale process that is going on. I don't think they would mind me saying that the last time they came to us there was due diligence being undertaken by potential purchasers, and really that's probably all I think I could say in fairness in this meeting.
And I attended those meetings as well.
It's fine, I just wanted to understand that that's obviously within the mix, and I think you've identified that, thank you. Mr Chair, I've just got a few other ones. Just in relation to page 43 of our report, you've looked at the long-term financial basis for the asset management planning, and you are looking at the loads running out to adequate capacity for to treat projected loads to 2025. That's not that far away. So just in terms of, is that adequate, just in terms of, a time frame, given the assets and the complexity around these assets in terms of asset management planning, or is there something more I should read in that there's a, and you talk about, we're good to 25 without further significant capital investment, but I guess what that creates a question for me is, and then what?
Through you, Mr Chair, it's a good question. You'll probably be aware that the board has submitted a resource consent renewal for 35 years for the plant. That submission was notified. It closed last week. And in the 35-year consent application, we obviously had to deal with growth. And there's a lot more detail and forecasting for us to be able to seek a 35-year consent beyond the year 2025. I think at the moment we have earmarked in our future budgets quite significant capital to respond to both growth and also to respond to what the actual resource consent conditions may be. And that's taken up a lot of energy in the last couple of years. So we also have a meeting coming up, in fact, next week, where we're going to be talking about growth, and a significant capital item is the regional pipeline, which at the moment there's a risk because we don't have total redundancy. And at that meeting, we've asked all of the contributors to come along and to renew their forecasts of which they've either built in as industrial businesses or as the two councils. So I believe that we have certainly done forecasting beyond 2025. I'm not sure that's enough of a response at the moment.
I suppose, Mr. Chair, just a follow-up question and in relation to that, and you've highlighted that capital expenditure may be there. Have we, and this may be a question for Mr. Levertis, have we seen the 10-year debt projections, and are they sustainable for us as a council if you're talking about coming to talk to the councils and the customers? So has there been because we've got a 10-year, we've got an LTP that's now out for consultation. Is it contemplating the additional capital expenditure or call on capital and debt issues for us in relation to NRSBU?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can assure you that has been done. Andrew Bishop acts for the board, and he also acts for the council. And I know that we have forwarded and requested that the information that is in here be included in the long-term plan, and I'm pretty confident that it has been. But Ali could confirm that.
Okay, thank you. Got a couple more, if that's right. Yes, yeah. I feel like I might be the only person interested in NRSBU at this table. Rogers, take you, Mr. Robinson, to your, and this is the KPI ones. It's actually a very similar question to what I had last time on the landfill. So on page 45, you've got a suite of long-term objectives and then key performance indicators, and in that bottom box there, you talk about the environmental, social and cultural impacts are considered in all decision making. So again, it's a similar question to what I had on the landfill, and you may have a similar answer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. And at the last board meeting, there was I guess it was an agreement or an instruction that the two chairs would approach the two chief executives to talk about about having an iwi advisor. There was, before I was involved, there was an iwi advisor on the board, and there is a strong willingness and a desire to have an iwi advisor to be part of the committee in the format that's agreed in the memorandum of understanding. And so the sooner that can happen, the better. And I understand that there is action underway.
Yes, I hope so. I think there is action underway as of a meeting this week. So just in relation to that, because we're looking at the business plan, this is actually a question that I shall save it for when we come to your, as we go through the, probably the next stage of the process. So now if I've jumped ahead on my pages, I apologise, but we're looking at the draft business plan. So if we're looking at the matter there in relation to beneficial economic and environmental reuse of fresh wastewater is maintained or increased. Mr. Chair, this is probably for the committee, is I have a strong desire to see not just maintenance of that reuse, but actually increase of that reuse. So is now the time, if I felt that was the direction that we should take as a council, is now the time for us to say, look, thank you, we're receiving the plan, but we'd actually like an amendment to make that increase so that it's overt. And that might be whether that's we receive advice from Mr Robinson around that, or you as chair. Obviously, this is our, I mean, I take it this is our opportunity to influence the business plan.
Certainly.
Yes, so if that's where we want to go, I presume we need to do that today.
So we have a report coming forward from Opus relating to the reuse of the water, so that we reduce the amount going into the estuary with a view to using that for irrigation, things of that nature. Mr Robinson will confirm roughly when we expect a response from that report.
Yes, through you, Mr Chair, to Madam Mayor. We have, there was a report that was done back in 2010 by Opus looking at the reuse of the treated wastewater, and we have in the last month engaged Opus to do a renewal of that plan and to look at the potential beneficiaries. They include both the golf courses and various other potential areas for reuse. At the moment, there's a consent that allows a certain volume of spray irrigation to land, and it is it's our desire to certainly increase the amount of disposal to land through irrigation over and above what our current consent allows. So when that report comes through, it's being sponsored at the moment by the board, by the business unit, and the idea would be that it would be a technical report, and that I would work with both councils, and then we would present a report which will go to the board and to both councils. And I believe that it needs to not only be based purely on economics, I think it needs to be based on community benefit, environmental benefit, and of course financial viability. And so that's underway, and there's a strong readiness, I think, to hope to see that to come through to fruition. So that's where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Mr Robinson. It's very positive. And Mr Chair, I will flag that I will be seeking a change to this to remove the word maintained and essentially have this increased. So there's a direction, strong direction, and we can, if we've got an opportunity to re-debate that when it comes up to council. But I think we, in terms of the direction that we need to be heading in terms of wastewater, from a cultural point of view, it doesn't sit well with me for us to be discharging even treated wastewater out into the CMA. So the more that we can do to reduce that and have it going back to land, the better in my view. I think that would be an expectation coming quite strongly from our community in terms of wastewater management.
Yeah, there's certainly a great desire from the business unit to pursue that. It makes real sense. It's done in a number of situations overseas, and there has been discussions going on for quite some period. We've now reached a stage where we're going beyond discussions, getting this report, and I think you'll find there will be activity once we know that.
Okay, thank you. Mr Chair, just a couple more questions. This is one I'm going to need some help with from Mr Robinson. Mr Robinson, because we haven't dealt with the annual report, I will have a question around pump stations and whether we've had discharge issues around pump stations. If I was wanting to, and I understand you've got a consent that you need to comply with, but as a principle of, just as we've discussed the issue of wastewater discharge into the CMA, if we wanted to go beyond what is in the consent, where would I find that in this business plan? This business plan. So if we were looking at, for instance, I'm looking at, and obviously we've had some storm events that have put the systems under pressure, absolutely, but whether we've got the capacity, and you've got a new consent that you've just applied for in relation to pump stations, the ability to retain, to avoid this issue, where would I see that in this business plan? Is it there in terms of our KPI?
Let me think. Through you, Mr Chair. So we've received the resource consent conditions for 4 of our 5 pump stations under the Nelson City Council Resource Management Plan, and we now have to I guess, absorb those conditions and put them in place and respond to the conditions that are in there. So we're currently having a look at doing that. I guess the biggest reason why there is an overflow is because both councils' infrastructure still has significant infiltration. And we're aware and keep passing on the message, and we're aware that both councils are taking it very seriously. And so I guess if there's a single factor, I'm maybe not quite answering your question at the moment correctly, there's a single factor that can actually stop the aberration or discharge, that's the accidental discharge of sewage. It's the councils being able to improve and decrease the infiltration of stormwater into the sewer system. I think the response at the moment is that we now have the consent conditions, and we now need to work out a plan as to how we're going to respond to them. The weather events of the recent cyclone have actually shown up a scenario that we didn't contemplate, and that was specifically shown at the Beach Road pump station in Richmond, which actually is not part of the resource consent conditions. We won't treat it any differently. And so we, in fact, have a problem there. There was a sewage spill during a cyclone, I think it was the first one, Gita, and we have a short-term fix and we'll have a long-term fix, and we'll take that very seriously.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so is there anything in the business plan in terms of KPIs that focuses on those issues beyond 100% compliance with all resource consents? Is there anything that sets a cultural direction around those issues at the moment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, once again, I think that the hearing and the submission for the aberrational discharge consent, certainly brought out the concerns culturally of having sewage, apart from community, of having a sewage spill from those pump stations. So once again, inherently through those consent conditions, I think we have a good understanding of the potential impacts and the concerns. So when we update our business plan in the future, and our asset management plan actually is the plan that comes first, and then the business plan follows, we will include in that, I guess, an assessment of what the conditions are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may have to, or Mr. Levius maybe to help with something. I'm just conscious, today is the day, so I'm really conscious of, for the committee, that this is a really important document. And I actually, to be honest, I don't really think our council understands that. I think it has been seen as a tick box exercise as we've moved through. Well, it's not. It's a really critical document that comes today, a very, very important part of our infrastructure. It sits as part of our whole waste management system, and we need to be engaged with the document today. We have set for our council some very high aspirations in terms of environmental outcomes. If the Beach Road pump station discharges untreated wastewater, it actually ends up having an impact on the readings that I have to address in my regional council role for Te Hunanui Beach. And if it was this weekend and we were having the ocean swim, which we are, and we happen to have an event, we might have to cancel that. So I'm really conscious of the fact that we need to engage with this document and understand how we, as the owner of these assets, because ultimately it comes back, we have a shared responsibility, that we actually set this business unit up so that it is complementary to the objectives of our long-term plan around infrastructure and environment, which we've set as a priority. So and I may need a bit more time to just think that through before this comes as a recommendation to council, rather than spending a lot of time in the committee today, because I'm conscious that I've asked a lot of questions and you've all had to sit through them, and it's probably getting terribly boring for everybody now.
Through the Chair, to be helpful, if I may, I think Her Worship the Mayor has raised some important questions. One of our 4 pillars, obviously, is the environment, and I think now is the time for this business plan to reflect that. This is an opportunity for this council to, for this committee to give feedback to the council, which I then have to write back to Mr. Jeff Robinson. And I think now that the other point that I think Her Worship's making is that the aberrational discharge consent has been granted, and as a result of that, there are a number of things that the NRSBU need to do. It is now the time is opportune now to actually make sure that that is addressed in the current business plan and make sure that there's adequate budget in that and for the business plan to address how that's going to be undertaken. But certainly, I think that the environmental aspect as well as the aberrational needs to be addressed in this business plan. And so I'm trying to be helpful. Have I summarised that?
Councillor Ackland?
Yeah, that does sound really helpful. I mean, I'm just reading the report, Mr. Chair, page 36 and 37. None of these issues were flagged in the report from staff. So what's the outcome from here then? Do we kick up a touch to come back to this committee once that report's updated on those aspects, or perhaps Mr. Chief Executive?
It's with the I mean, the management of the scheme is Jeff. So he's your staff on this occasion. So we're not geared up to be looking over his shoulder. That's not our role. So this is exactly as the Mayor has indicated. It's a chance for the councillors as governance to set the direction they want to see for the business unit, and also so that our two representatives on that business unit understand what this council expects them to be advocating for. And I think that part of the problem is we haven't had that conversation, or you haven't had that conversation to define what it is that you want to see.
Thank you, that's helpful. No, it was more just the practical circumstance of actually gaining that knowledge and understanding those issues through either staff reporting would be useful, I think, to understand the options available to council. But if the advice is no, we just have a discussion about it at council, that's fine. I just need to understand exactly how that conversation takes place. Because I'm just referring to pages 36 and 37. Meets our long-term plan. Capital program is the same as the current NRSBU. Draft business plan is consistent with the financial programs used to develop current Nelson City Council draft long-term plan. So for me, it ticked all the boxes. I didn't see any red flags. So where do we have that conversation?
So if we're serious, I suppose I'm mindful of other areas where joint ventures have been set up and one council has not bought into it and has continued to maintain their own level of expertise and argue, then you don't get the benefits of a genuine joint operation. Effectively, Jeff is reporting to you here today as a independent senior staff member. So it's a little bit difficult for us to then write a report that agrees or disagrees with what he says. Straight away, we are undermining the role, and it isn't a genuine joint venture. So,
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Chair, I actually think that this is critically important, and this is the first time, and thank you, Jeff, and I'm sorry this is the first time we're getting to actually meet with you, because as our Chief Executive said, you are our advisor on this matter. You're independent. You're coming here to talk us through this business plan. But, Mr. Chair, I actually don't think we have had enough opportunity to think about the outcomes that we're trying to seek in alignment with our long-term plan. And it's a missed opportunity. So I'm wondering whether it would be worthwhile just taking an adjournment for morning tea and having a think about an opportunity just to chat with Jeff to say, look, how could we advance that? Whether it is that this committee moves this forward towards council, noting that there are some other matters that we wish to address, and whether we can have a session with Jeff in the interim to try and work our way through those, I don't know. But I do think that we are, really missing an opportunity here. I'm conscious that we don't have Ms. Barton available to us as well in terms of the regional council function, because this is where we have to dance that interesting dance across being a unitary authority, and it's fair to say there was a degree of tension around the resource consents, and there was around the resource consent process. There was quite a degree of tension around that. I just don't think that as a elected body, the council has been fully briefed by Jeff about both the implications, about what that looks like, and so we can consider that in terms of our aspirations in the long-term plan, and actually the practicality of what Jeff has got to deal with over this next period with the Regional Sewerage Business Unit. But it's, this is the opportunity to do it. And if we don't do it now, I'm not sure when we're going to do it. Because it gets ticked off, and NRSB are entitled to say to us, well, actually, you signed off the business plan. If you had a problem, you should have raised your issues then.
The only issue that we have just at the moment is that Mr Robinson has a need to go through the same exercise very shortly, within an hour, with TDC. And I'm mindful that we haven't had morning tea. However, we've still got the Sewerage Business Unit annual report to discuss. So I'm not sure how much questioning may come out of that. I'm happy to spend the time now, but I think we might need to forego our morning tea in order to keep things moving. Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, I think, picking up on what the Mayor's saying, if Jeff is going to go out to the TDC from here, then I think he needs to know our thoughts before he goes.
Right. Okay.
Otherwise, he'll be back.
Well, Mr Chair, I'd just perhaps ask if we could have a 5-minute adjournment just to try and work out a process forward, given you've given us some time constraints on this. But I'm sorry, the value of these assets, the implications of them on the environment are sufficient that I'm not prepared to be rushed on signing out a business plan. I wouldn't feel that I was serving my community well.
We'll call for a 5-minute adjournment, have a tea break during that time, and we reconvene in a few moments. Councillor Matheson? No, we're okay quorum-wise? Yep, all right.
So, the feeling we're getting from the meeting is that there's enough issues with the business plan in terms of the direction it's heading, particularly in terms of environmental standards, is that it would be better to have a workshop to discuss that rather than try and address those issues through a formal meeting process with a series of resolutions that might change it, and then and we're aware that Jeff's got to go out to Tasman District Council, have a similar conversation, and we think that there would be benefit in having a joint workshop with the shareholders to talk about the Regional Sewerage Business Unit and its strategic direction. So what we're recommending, Mr. Chair, is that the business plan be left lying on the table until we have the opportunity to have that joint workshop with the two councils, and Jeff can convey that information to Tasman District Council very shortly. But really there is no reason not to accept the annual report, because that is simply a summary of what has happened over the past 12 months.
All right, thank you. So I'd like to move then that we proceed on that basis, that we let the business plan lie.
Happy to second.
And it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, so then we have the annual report, item 10. Are there any alterations or improvements, Mr. Robinson, relating to that?
Mr. Chairman, no, there's none in the report.
All right, thank you. We take it all as being read. Are there any queries of Mr. Robinson regarding the annual report from the Sewerage Business Unit? No queries? Would someone like to move that we receive the annual report?
Sure, who to move?
Moved and seconded. Councillor Laurie? Put it. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. So that concludes that part of the business. Thank you, Mr. Robinson, for your attendance.
Thank you.
And hope that you get out to Richmond safely. Yeah. Thank you.
Right, you know we've had tea.
Sorry.